There might be light attendance on Father's Day.
It's locked.
Really?
Strict attendance policy.
Man.
Let Dad stay in the sleeper sofa or Sunday? Anyway, happy Father's Day.
This door locked. Hey,
Actually, looks like we're going to have about our same numbers as usual. Yes.
Early service is about the same, maybe a little bit.
Oh, really?
The choir is outstanding. It was, it's a guest choir. Guest choir. I don't know, he was, the director was at Hardin Simmons for 30 years.
When,
Yeah, that's it.
so, let's see, this is a little bit of an early announcement, but
leave it over. That door's
time to do another one. Actually, I think we're about a year behind. Normally, we do it every 3 years.
We did it in 14 last, I would do that.
14? Okay.
What did we
For a
do?
while, this was the last pictorial director.
Oh.
So, there is more details on this in the tapestry, but anyway, plan to have your picture taken. I guess we don't do that in August, don't we? August or early September. So that's coming up. Blood drive is next Sunday, 7:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. I assume probably in the James Gallery. That's where we've been doing it the last few times. Bert's not here. Bert Truax, I always mispronounce.
Yeah, Truax, yeah.
Truax, okay. His trumpet camp is this week. So if you want free trumpet lessons, Bert will teach you, or his some of his faculty members will teach you.
This is not just, you're making it sound like it's for beginners. These kids come from all over the United States.
Yeah.
And he has professionals that do that.
Yeah.
And
they have concerts.
Yes, well, that's what I was going to
yeah, they
say.
have concerts.
I was trying to.
Get that.
Yeah, if you don't want a lesson, you can still get a concert.
And
That's what I was.
oh, and this isn't a prayer request, but my niece who went to that trumpet camp several years ago just made the Aggie marching band.
Wow.
So it is really
Yeah, it's a
very.
I'm sorry if I didn't mean to
That's
sound-
okay, Henry.
I didn't mean to sound-
Give me a bad time, sorry.
Okay. Anyway, so that's going on this week, and concerts, which would probably be what any of us in this room would be interested in, will be 7 p.m. Every night. I think that's
Yeah.
Monday through Friday. So it really is quite a treat. And speaking of concerts, there will be a concert, the annual patriotic concert that the Wilshire Winds does. Will be on July 1st, 6:30 p.m. Guest soloist is Maurice Lanier, who I'm not familiar with her, but I think she's a pretty big deal. So she will be joining us for our patriotic concert. Do we wait for prayer requests to talk about?
I think you can talk about it now.
Okay,
Oh, good.
I figured it's probably on most people's minds.
Yeah.
So Friday, Alyssa Topper gave birth to a girl. And the baby girl is fine. Alyssa's having some trouble. The extent of my knowledge is what was in the email that some of the deacons received, but brain swelling. Does anybody have any?
I talked to someone this morning and that has an instant knowledge, and she is better.
Okay.
She's stable. She's got a long way to go.
Better, but not out of the woods.
Yeah, stable. Yeah.
The baby was 2 weeks early, right?
Yeah.
Did that-
Due the 29th.
29.
Yeah.
But the baby weighed 6 pounds 5 ounces, which is a good birth weight, especially to be two, because they really cut out the weight. So the baby birth weight was good.
Okay.
And she seems to be, it can affect the baby, the preeclampsia, but it doesn't seem to.
So it's preeclampsia, okay.
That was the first thing. She'd been to the, we used to, well, no, I'm getting this from Mark.
Yeah,
From what he told he sent out a message to the discovery class.
okay.
That she, sometime last week, she went to her doctor because she was having, symptoms undoubtedly. You put her undoubtedly on some medicine, don't know the details on that, but the next day or within 2 days, she went to the emergency room. They admitted her at that time. And undoubtedly were treating her blood pressure. And then she went into labor. I understand that he didn't say that they induced labor, but they sometimes do in these circumstances. And she gave birth that afternoon. Baby was fine. And she was stable, and then she started bleeding out. And a preeclampsia, they can have that. That's one of the things that happens. Also, sometimes it's something as small as a piece of the placenta that broke off and it didn't come out, and that can cause real heavy bleeding. Don't know the exact cause, but she was bleeding out, and they gave her transfusions, of course, and stabilized her. But it was at that point, that afternoon on Friday, she was kind of, they said, semi-conscious. Now, I don't know if that could be medication. I don't know. And at one point, I heard that she was having vision problems, which goes along with it, can.
Mhm.
But this morning, it seemed like she was much, they said that she was better, had a long way to go, but the baby's doing so good that they may discharge the baby,
Yeah.
which is going to be interesting to take.
Right.
Well,
Her mother's here and her sister's here.
and Allison Wingfield is my source of information, and I talked to her just a few minutes ago, and she said some of the women in the church, maybe one of them, we're all getting together to take care of everything, before Alyssa. They're on top of it, but Allison urged prayer.
Yeah, well, so prayer, but hold off on texts and email to Jacob before the time being, because he's got enough to deal with without having to worry about trying to respond to people and things like that.
Yeah, undoubtedly, because Julie Gerard is the judge.
Right. Mhm.
He is in contact with people that are talking to him, so it's probably better just to let a few select people have that role for now. So he's at the top of he and Alyssa are at the top of the prayer list, which is going around. So we will include them at the end. Dennis will close in prayer. I've got to scoot right at 10:35, 10:40. Anyway, any announcements that I should have made that I didn't?
Henry, we
Yes.
do know the baby's name, Hadley.
Hadley, I'm sorry, yes, Hadley.
Mhm.
And if I remember correctly, they were going to wait until she was born to decide on that, so.
What he said on the news on trip is that it was really a big discussion.
Yes.
They just didn't flop on a name.
Yeah. All right. Well, so normally at this point, I provide an introduction. This morning, I'll just provide a disclaimer.
Tell about yourself.
I'm not a Bible scholar, I just play one on TV. YouTube.
Quite good, Henry.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yes.
Actually, it's, if you're not a Bible scholar, but you are tasked with teaching Sunday school at Wilshire, it's not that hard to, you can't turn a corner in this building without bumping into somebody that went to seminary. So it's pretty easy to find help or resources. Mine is Chad Mustaine, who actually taught on Esther in the perennial class down the hall about 6 weeks ago because he was substituting for me because I was supposed to teach it. And it was Easter morning and we had lots of stuff going on, and so I asked him to help out. So actually it all worked out very well. He taught the class and now I could rely on his notes to teach this one. So, and you know, did some research on my own. But anyway, so, well, all right, I picked the wrong one. Let's try this one. That one works. Purim. We're going, I am, and we all are going to mispronounce a lot of words today, so that's okay. But I think you say Purim. Okay. Is anyone familiar with this term? It is a Jewish holiday in February. Does anybody have any personal experience with Jewish friends or family? Jerry?
Do you really want to know? First job I had with Dallas Public Library was at Preston Royal, and that was huge Jewish community, and we used to do a Purim puppet show every year.
Oh, you did a puppet show.
We did a puppet show.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Well,
We have a huge.
And I think every year at Passover, Brad Sham reads the whole book of Esther at Temple Emmanuel. And that's
Okay.
Really?
Wow. During Passover.
Your Passover, yeah.
Well, that's also what they do during the Purim, which they read the scroll of Esther. Purim normally is sometime in February. It is to commemorate or to celebrate a Jewish uprising and victory against an attempted genocide against them when they were supposed to be living among the Persians during their time when the Persian Empire was in control of the ancient world. And this attempted genocide was supposedly, the date of it, when it was supposed to happen, it was scheduled, okay? But the date was supposedly picked at random. Purim is the Hebrew word for lots, as in lots, L-O-T-S. It's plural, P-U-R, pur is lot, okay? As in to cast lots, okay, gambling, luck of the draw, yeah, fate, okay, that's the idea. So what do they do for Purim? Well, they read the scroll of Esther, they eat traditional foods, they give gifts to friends, to the poor. There is a lot of drinking, okay? In fact, the idea is the good guy in the Esther story is Mordecai, and the bad guy is Haman. And you're supposed to drink enough to where you can no longer distinguish between the phrase "cursed be Haman" and "blessed be Mordecai." That's the idea.
A lot of drinking.
In fact, they read aloud the scroll of Esther, and when Haman's name is mentioned, there's a lot of booing and hissing. I think there are props that are used. I can't remember what they're called. I just have in my mind the Rocky Horror Picture Show. You know, the movie that people go and watch, and they've watched it so many times that there's a point in the movie where they repeat the lines that the actors are saying, or they throw popcorn, or whatever they do. I think the same kind of thing happens for some celebrations for Purim. And Jerry?
One more little thing. Sarah did one of the children's musicals years ago on this story, and she called it Malice in the Palace.
Now, I remember that.
Oh, yeah, I do remember that.
Did I miss it? I mixed it up. The good guy is Mordecai.
Okay.
The bad guy is Haman. Apologize. Yeah. So some people kind of think of this as sort of the Jewish version of Mardi Gras. Okay. There's a wearing of masks. That's one of the traditions. More on that later. Although calling it Jewish Mardi Gras is probably a little extreme. I don't think it's quite what you would see going on in New Orleans this year, but that's kind of the idea. All right, so let's get some historical context behind the story. Jacob did a real good job last week of kind of giving you the basis for what's going on in Jewish history during, to help you understand Ruth better. So I'm not going to rehash all that, but some of y'all have heard me call this before. It's the ABCs of Bible history at this point. This is a little device to help remember the names of different empires that are in control at various points in time of the Jewish people. A stands for Syria, the Assyrian Empire. B stands for Babylonian Empire. Let's do that. C stands for
Chaldean?
Cyrus.
C can stand for Cyrus, who was king of the Persian Empire. C also rhymes with P.
This is starting to break down, Henry.
Think Cyrus, think And the Persian Empire is the one that allowed the Jews to go home, or at least gave them the opportunity. The Babylonians sent them into exile. The Persians at least gave, those that had been forcibly put out in exile the opportunity to go back home. Now, the empires that come after this, people kind of already, if you've studied much Western civ history, you kind of already know this. The Greek Empire came after the Persians, think Alexander the Great. And then who was in control during the New Testament times? Roman Empire.
Before the days.
So where are the Egyptians in all
The Egyptians are way up here.
this? Okay.
This all happens after they fled Egypt and formed their own country and had David as king, Saul, and then David, and then Solomon. And then after Solomon, the kingdom divided into two, the northern and the southern kingdom. And then that's where Assyrians get involved, and then the rest of this plays out into New Testament times. So another helpful thing to think of is if this were Rotten Tomatoes, how would the Jewish people rank their experience in these different empires? So, and I can't draw a tomato, so I'll just do a happy face or a smiley face. All right, so, well,
Uh-oh.
Sorry.
all right. So the Assyrians would get a big crown. Babylonians would send them off into exile. Another big crown. Let's see if this works. The Persians, Cyrus let them go home, remember? He'd get a fresh rating. Actually, a lot of their Persian experience, and again, I'm not a Bible scholar, so I may be overgeneralizing here, but a lot of their experience in Persia seemed pretty good compared to what they had experienced under the Babylonian oppression. But then the Greeks came along and they experienced lots of discrimination again, and then I think we know how they felt about the Romans. Okay? So when does the story of Esther, this story about this attempted genocide of the Jewish people take place? Esther takes place during the Persian Empire, which has made some people question some of the historical aspects of Esther. Okay. In fact, when they read Esther, there's a lot of, some scholars, not all, but some scholars will say that doesn't really, the descriptions of Persian culture and politics and just kind of the details and mechanics of how things work doesn't really jive with a lot of what you find in other historical sources. But they think that Esther might have been written during the Jews' experience under Greek rule. I'll put a question mark by that because that's not set in stone. No pun intended there. That's just what some scholars think.
You're saying perhaps the story of Esther really, the Esther experience really didn't happen during the Persian?
No, I'm saying that some scholars think that the story of Esther is influenced by their experience and what happened later on in time. And by way of illustration, let me again go back to what Jacob was talking about last week. Jacob talked about, he mentioned the book, The Once and Future King by T.H. White, okay, which was a British author, written during and after World War II, I believe, to the British people. But it is stories about King Arthur and the legends of King Arthur, stories that came from their past, okay? But yet when you read the book, The Once and Future King, and you're reading about King Arthur, it's really addressing issues to its audience members, their present day issues, things that they were dealing with during the war and after the war. But it does it by retelling stories from their past. Now, some scholars think that the same thing may be going on with Esther. Okay, it may be that they are having this certain experiences during while they're under Greek rule, but they use the story of their experience during Persian rule to kind of address some of the spiritual crises that they may be going through. Now that's all just background, and that's, like I said, that's not set in stone, but it helps some people sort of understand the context of this book. Now one of my rules is that I know I can't screw things up if we read scripture. At least if I can have us all be exposed to and read the scripture that we've got, then I feel like at least I've accomplished that. So if we will, I think we can get through this in about 10 minutes. We don't have the entire book of Esther. It's about 10 chapters. So what I'm going to do is I will read to you what I think are the main plot points that are not included in the scripture text, and then we'll read scripture, and we can, like, I'll start us off, and then we can kind of alternate, and then I'll close this, and then I think we ought to be able to get through that fairly efficiently. So, before our scripture passage begins, here is what has happened. Now, the king's name in this passage is, well, I'm going to mispronounce it now, Ahasuerus. Okay? I'm going to make it easier for myself, and I'm going to call him Xerxes. Because a lot of people think that this is actually the Persian king that's being referred to. It's easier for me to pronounce. Okay? So feel free to do what I do. And as far as some of the other names in the story, everybody gets a pass, including me right now, whether we get these names pronounced right or not. So
Where are you going to start reading?
I'm going to give you some, I'm going to tell you what has happened before,
Okay.
and then I will start, and then if someone can pick up with chapter, verse 19, right there, the second paragraph. And we'll just kind of alternate paragraphs. I'll jump in when necessary. Okay? So before our story begins, King Xerxes is known for having these wild parties, or banquets. This whole book of Esther is just filled with one banquet after another. Everything seems to happen at a banquet. And in one of these banquets, one of these parties, he wants to show off his queen. Okay? But she refuses to come. She refuses to participate. So he and his advisors get angry about this, and he deposes her because she's setting a bad example for everybody. But he needs a queen. All right, so he holds the Miss Persia beauty pageant, to pick the next queen. There are hundreds of contestants. One contestant is Esther. Esther is a Jewish orphan raised by her cousin Mordecai, who is a devout Jew. They're part of lower social classes, okay? But she is still very well liked and admired, both for her personality and for her physical beauty, by those in her community and those who work for King Xerxes. And that is where we begin. So, when Esther was taken to King Xerxes in his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign, the king loved Esther more than all the other women. Of all the virgins, she won his favor and devotion, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king gave a great banquet to all his officials and ministers, Esther's banquet. He also granted a holiday to the provinces and gave gifts with royal liberality.
When the virgins were being gathered together, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Now Esther had not revealed her kindred or her people as Mordecai charged her, for Esther obeyed Mordecai just as when she was brought up by him. In those days, while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. But the matter came to knowledge of Mordecai, and he told it to Queen Esther, and Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai. When the affair was investigated and found to be so, both men were hanged on the gallows, and it was recorded in the book of the annals in the presence of the king.
After these things, King Xerxes promoted Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the officials who were with him. And all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and did obeisance to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai did not bow down or do obeisance. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's command?" When they spoke to him day after day, and he would not listen to them, they told Haman in order to see whether Mordecai's words would avail. For he had told them he was a Jew. While Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or do obeisance to him, Haman was infuriated. But he thought it beneath him to lay hands on Mordecai alone. So, having been told who Mordecai's people were, Haman plotted to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes.
And then, you mentioned,
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Then Xerxes said to then Haman said to King Xerxes, "There was a certain people scattered and separated among the peoples of all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of every other people, and they do not keep the king's laws." So it is not appropriate for the king to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued for their destruction, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who have charge of the king's business, so that they may put it into the king's treasuries. So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, son of
That's all right.
and Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. The king said to Haman, "The money is given to you and the people as well, to do with them as it seems good to you," which probably means,
Yeah, there you go. So Haman sets the process to have this decree issued against the Jews, this irrevocable decree. The king's signet is used. The idea is that the edict, the decree cannot be revoked. Then the king's secretaries were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and an edict, according to all that Haman commanded, was written to the king's satraps, advisors, and to the governors, and over all the provinces and to the officials of all the peoples, to every province in its own script and every people in its own language. It was written in the name of King Xerxes and sealed with the king's ring. The letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces, giving orders to destroy, to kill, to annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, around February, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province by proclamation, calling on all peoples to be ready for that day. The couriers went quickly by order of the king, and the decree was issued in the citadel of Susa, the capital of Persia. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. It's all right, I'll keep going. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on a sackcloth and ashes and went through the city, wailing with a loud and bitter cry. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one might enter the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. In every province, whenever the king's command and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting and weeping and lamenting, and most of them lay in sackcloth and ashes. Now at this point in our text, it skips around, but at some point Mordecai establishes contact with one of the king's, someone who works for the king, who is close to Esther. His name is Hatash, or Hathash. And Mordecai told him, Hathash, all that had happened to him, and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther, explain it to her, and charge her to go to the king to make supplication to him, to entreat him for her people. Hathash went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hathash and gave him a message for Mordecai, saying, all the king's servants and all the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law. All alike are to be put to death. Only if the king holds out the golden scepter to someone may that person live. I myself have not been called to come into the king for 30 days. When they told Mordecai what Esther had said, and Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all of the other Jews. For if you keep silence at such time as this, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another quarter. But you and your family, that you and your father's family will perish. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this. Then Esther said in reply to Mordecai, go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold fast on my behalf, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will also fast as you do. After that I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Mordecai went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him.
On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace opposite the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne inside the palace opposite the entrance to the palace. As soon as the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won his favor, and he held out to her the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther approached and touched the top of the scepter. The king said to her, what is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given you even to the half of my kingdom. Then Esther said, if it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to a banquet that I have prepared for the king. Then the king said, bring Haman quickly, so that we may do as Esther desires. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. While they were drinking wine, the king said to Esther, What is your petition? It shall be granted you. And what is your request? Even to the half of my kingdom, it shall be fulfilled. Then Esther said, this is my petition and request. If I have won the king's favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet that I will prepare for them, and then I will do as the king has said.
Haman went out that day happy and in good spirits. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate and observed that he neither arose nor trembled before him, he was infuriated with Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. Then he sent and called for his friends and his wife Zeresh, and Haman recounted to them the splendor of his riches, the number of his sons, all the promotions with which the king had honored him, and how he had advanced him above the officials and the ministers of the king. Haman added, even Queen Esther let no one but myself come with the king to the banquet that she prepared. Tomorrow also I am invited by her, together with the king. Yet all of this does me no good, so long as I see the Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate. Now at this point, we skip forward in the story. Here are the important plot points. Okay? After this first banquet, and after Haman sees Mordecai, he's angered by it again, that Mordecai won't bow down to him. So he orders that a gallows be built to hang Mordecai. Moreover, after this first banquet, King Xerxes goes home. He has trouble sleeping, and he asks someone to read to him so that he can go to sleep. And they read to him from the record. They read these old government records where they just happen to mention this event previously where Mordecai had informed them of the attempt to assassinate the king, and it had been recorded in the record. Now, Xerxes is reminded of this. He thinks, I need to honor Mordecai. He goes to Haman. Xerxes goes to Haman, and he asks Haman, what's an appropriate way to honor someone? Haman, not knowing that Xerxes is talking about Mordecai, Haman thinks that Xerxes is talking about himself. Remember how he's bragging to all of his friends about how much the king loves him and how he's so well respected. Haman continues in this vein, and he tells Xerxes, well, if you want to honor somebody, you should parade them through the town, dress them, dress them up really nice, put them on horseback, and parade them around through the town. Xerxes says, you know what, that's a good idea. I want you, Haman, you're responsible for doing that to Mordecai. And he orders him to do this for Mordecai. All right, so that all happens. Now we return to the story. I'll close this out because we're almost done. So the king and Haman went in to feast with Queen Esther. Now the second banquet, okay? On the second day, as they were drinking wine, the king again said, they're always drinking wine, as the king again said to Esther, what is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. And what is your request? Even to half of my kingdom it shall be fulfilled. Then Queen Esther answered, if I have won your favor, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me. That is my petition. And the lives of my people. That is my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. If we had been sold merely as slaves, men and women, I would have held my peace. But no enemy can compensate for this damage to the king. Then King Xerxes said to Queen Esther, who is he? And where is he? Who has presumed to do this? Esther said, a foe and an enemy, this wicked Haman. At this point, people would boo and hiss during the pure celebration. Then Haman was terrified before the king and the queen. The king rose from the feast in wrath and went into the palace garden, but Haman stayed to beg his life from Queen Esther. For he saw that the king had determined to destroy him. When the king returned from the palace and from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman had thrown himself on the couch where Esther was reclining. And the king said, will he even assault the queen in my presence in my own house? As the words left the mouth of the king, they covered Haman's face. And what happened to Haman? Well, after this second banquet and all that I just read, Xerxes ordered that Haman be hanged. And where should he be hanged? On the gallows that Haman ordered built for Mordecai. Then, after that, he gives Mordecai Haman's job. Okay? Joseph in Egypt. Kind of the same arrangement. Okay? Then, Xerxes permits for a second decree, another irrevocable decree with his signet, to be issued. This time, granting the Jews the right to assemble and defend themselves. And the Jews follow through with this decree. The decree says they can defend themselves on the same day that they've been ordered to be annihilated. Okay. The Jews prevail, killing tens of thousands of people, including women and children, who had the authority to attack the Jews under the authority of the first irrevocable decree that Haman pushed through. That last part there, I don't think that Sarah included that in the palace. Okay. That gets left out of the kids' version of this. It just says, oh, the Jews were free and everybody was happy. Well, that's what's actually in the story. If there are elements to this story that you aren't comfortable with, you know, whether it's this massive slaughter at the end, whether it's this the way the king kind of objectifies women, okay, with the beauty pageant and the way Esther kind of rises to power through having to work through all that dysfunction. If any of that bothers you, you're not alone, okay? Here's what Martin Luther has to say about Esther, and he's also commenting on one of the other books in the Apocrypha, which is in the Catholic Bible, but not the Protestant Bible. I am so hostile to 2nd Maccabees, that's in the Apocrypha, and to Esther, that I could wish that they did not exist at all, for they Judaize too greatly and have much pagan impropriety. So this has been a controversial book.
Is it the one that doesn't mention God?
Yes.
That's where I'm going. I got 10 minutes to do it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jim. So what are the themes of Esther? Okay. Well, this can be an example to Jews about how they can survive and thrive among Gentiles, work within the system, okay? And this is a message that would have resonated very strongly for its audience. Whether the audience was living under Greek rule or Persian rule, it would have resonated for both. A common thing that happens here is this sort of ironic reversal of fortune, sort of turning of the tables, okay? Esther goes from being a lower class to becoming a queen. Mordecai gets Haman's job. The Jews that are the intended victims of the first decree end up becoming the empowered victors of the second decree. And then the reversal part, okay? Those who have power, they lose it, okay? Haman, okay, is the ultimate example of this. He expresses how he would like to be honored, but then he is forced to honor his enemy, Mordecai, in the very manner that he described how Haman wanted to be honored. He loses his job. Haman loses his job, loses his life on the gallows that he had ordered built for Mordecai. And then those that were in Haman's camp, who were opposed to the Jews, they end up being killed by the Jews. They are empowered by decree to kill the Jews, and then they end up falling by the sword because the Jews now have a new decree in which they can do likewise. Now you can argue that this shows, yes?
I just have one question, so I can get something right in my brain.
Okay.
At what point during the relationship between Xerxes and Esther does Xerxes know that Esther is Jewish?
When she says, At
Right
the
there at
very
the
end,
end.
second banquet.
So.
Her identity as a
That's what
Jew
I'm
is,
talking about.
is hidden the entire time.
Entire time.
Until the very end, after she's already
And he
established.
didn't
a
say, oh
relationship.
my gosh, you're Jewish?
Yeah.
Instead, he's all of a sudden, she's got him snookered or something.
Yeah, yeah. Various ways to put that. Yeah, snooker is probably. All this reversal of fortune is can show, you can argue that this shows the upside down nature of the way God works, okay? Sort of turning the tables. But it begs the question that Jim has already asked. Where's God? Where's God in any of this?
Or what's the point, what's God's point in allowing this to happen?
Yeah.
We always believe things evolve, in a way that he, in macro sense, a 10 to 10, what would that be?
God is not mentioned at one point in the story. Now, in later translations, I think in the Catholic Bible, there are appendices for the original Hebrew text. God is not mentioned. In the later Greek translations, which are included in the Catholic Bible, there are appendices in which there is some reference to God in prayer. But the original Hebrew text, no reference to God.
But to me, when I look at this, I take it as an example of how God, Jesus came among the Jews later on. And it said that God never really intends for the Jewish to be, he's going to, in a sense, protect the Jews throughout. I mean, maybe that's not after the, with the beginning of Christ, but throughout history. He's got to protect the Jews. We are, at what point in time are we? We're
about
800 BC or something?
Well, the story takes place about
Not that
400-ish BC, although arguably the audience that the story speaks to might be 300, 200 BC. But we're still in a significant amount of time before the coming of Christ.
So we can't let the Jews be exterminated.
Right. It's still, there still is the question, why isn't God directly mentioned? And you think about the name of I erased it, but the name of the festival, Purim, okay? Casting lots, the luck of the draw, okay? And the idea is that it may appear that these are just sort of random occurrences, that it's blind fate. Is it blind fate, or is it the hidden hand of God acting behind the scenes? When you look at the plot, the major plot points, it could go either way. Esther happens to be chosen queen and put in a position of influence. Okay? Mordecai just happens to hear about the plot against Xerxes. And then King Xerxes just happens to grant Esther an audience. He didn't have to. He allows her to touch the scepter, and then she can have the banquets and eventually get an audience with him. And then Xerxes just happens to be reminded about the fact that Mordecai was the one who saved him from the assassins long ago. Now, it may be that the author is intentionally leaving out any reference to God. Why? Why would the author do that?
It's really interesting. This occurred to me yesterday. I don't know if y'all have listened to George's Good God podcast this week, but he interviewed Tim Krause, who wrote the book about his son, and he talks about how he's talking to George, right? He goes, "I'm really proud of the fact I didn't quote scripture in this book." And George is like, "You're proud of that fact. Please elaborate," And so he talks about how, because for his son who had a cervical spinal cord injury, who could have been like on a ventilator, he got up and walked out of the hospital, and anyone would have the tendency to call that a miracle. And he's like, but then why are there people who don't have this miracle? And so I think he told the story of all the people who were there at the right place and the right time. And it wasn't because the whole issue of God causing things or allowing things to happen came up. And so he really kind of left it open for the reader to decide if this was a miracle or not. So there's a kind of a parallel to me as after having listened to that podcast.
I thought about bringing up Tim's book, but I haven't read it
Oh,
yet.
and I haven't either. This
But-
was just the discussion of
Okay.
it.
And it
Yeah.
is great in the fact that he does, each person that played a pivotal point in his recovery, he interviewed, or he has actually talked to, either on the phone or in person. And some of these people are from Switzerland or France or Italy, somewhere. They were over here doing,
Well, yeah.
riding mountain bikes.
There was someone from Iran who was a mountain bike cartographer, and like he was the one who found Theo. Any other person who would have found him might not have been able to tell the emergency people how to get there. So it was,
I mean,
Tim's
things
point
like
was,
that.
there were people at the right place at the right time who ministered to Theo.
Because these were nurses, I think that these two women were
Yeah,
nurses.
he didn't talk about that in the interview, but
And
yeah.
so that was, they were the first ones to give medical assistance. Because it's like 4 hours or something like that. They happen to have a thermal blanket that you put on people to prevent shock. Happened to have one. Never had been used, always carried it with them.
The word that y'all are making me think of is providence. It's a word that my parents use all the time. My parents don't say it's a God thing. And when I hear the phrase, it's a God thing, I usually hear that in the context of, oh, I needed a parking spot, and there was one available. Oh, it's just a God thing. God's up there pulling the strings, just making things happen specifically for me. Okay? When my parents and people of their generation say providence, I don't think that's what they mean. I think what they mean is more the idea that I think might be the motivating factor for why the author of Esther does not specifically mention God. He's trying to speak to an audience of people that are living among foreigners, and the face of God to them may seem hidden, okay? As if, like behind a mask, think about Purim, people wear masks. That is one of the ideas, is that the face of God is actually maybe hidden, but still active behind the scenes. This is a phrase, I don't know who said it, but it was in Chad's materials, and it was, I'll figure out, I can give the proper quote to the attribution to this, but I liked it. Providence is that continuing agency of God by which he makes all events of the physical and moral universe fulfill the original design with which he created it. That reference to all events makes me, and that's talking about the good stuff and the bad stuff, okay? It makes me think of Paul, Romans 8:28. Some of you might already know this. Paul says, we know that all things work together for good, for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. And I think the idea is that God, there may be chaos, but God can work amidst the chaos, among the chaos, behind the chaos, beyond the chaos. That there's something going on that is greater than what appear to be random events that are happening among us. Poker analogy here. No matter what cards may fall on the table, okay, God is always holding the winning hand. It really doesn't matter what cards fall on the table if God is always holding the winning hand. Think about what Mordecai says to Esther, okay, to inspire her to take action, okay? For if you keep silence at such time as this, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another quarter. It's already set in place, okay? You can be part of it, or you can choose not to be part of it. Relief may rise from another quarter, but you and your father's family will perish. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this.
Well, that means God is mentioned in this, in a sense. the providence that he intends is mentioned.
It allows you to make that call.
We are the God people here, all of us. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days. You are with God. God always in the picture of your life. No matter you want or not, He's there for you. Unless you talk about this Jewish little girl, Esther, very, very humble person. And he have a book in the Bible. And I read it, I said, where's the God? God is everywhere. God is in our life, in Dale's life, in Barbara's life, Patty's life, Rhea's life, all of us' life. Every 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. That's where your strength came from. That's why you believe Him. That's why you are here. That's why you give money to the church. That's why you do the things for each other. No condition asked. Because you want to do the thing for this very unconditional love of God. That's how that is.
Robert, there's a quote here, I think it speaks right to what you're talking about. I do have the name of this person. It's Carrie Moore. I'm not familiar with her, but she sums up what I think Robert is saying and what I think the author of Esther is trying to tell us. In Esther, the God of the Jews is not seen or heard on stage, but is surely standing in the wings, following the play and arranging the props, not necessarily pulling the strings, okay, but arranging the props for successful resolution of the play.
Henry, I was at a funeral at Broadway a few months ago, and I knew you were going to teach this lesson, so I took a picture of one of the pictures in the narthex, which is Esther preparing to meet the king.
I forgot about that.
And I just mailed each one of you that picture.
That's right, I forgot that that's in the narthex. Speaking of narthex, I have got to go. My parents are showing up, and I got to get them. So anyway, Dennis is going to close you out. Oh, yeah.
All right, let's go through the prayer requests here. And of course, Elisa and Jacob are on the list. We'll continue to pray for her. And is her brain swelling gone down, or do we know this? Or
All I know is that she was a little better this morning, but still not out of the woods, a long way to
and they have
go.
had such a terribly hard time trying to get pregnant in the first place, and now this happening. So
They haven't known a bit of pregnancy until, I think, the beginning of last week.
right. Okay. This is Nate. Prayers for my friend Amber for the loss of her husband, Max.
And I just found out about this yesterday through social media, and nobody really knows of how he died, but one of my friends took a look and he died like at 29.
Good.
Oh,
Yeah.
1,500 children who have been separated from their parents at the U.S.-Mexico border. That's certainly something we want to pray for. Anything else we want to add to this?
Jeff's test is tomorrow. This is an all-day test. They call it step 1, and it determines his clinicals.
Yeah.
So for the last 2 years of his medical
They
school.
have to pass this part of the
Yeah, it's a,
book work.
And that's tomorrow.
yes.
Good. All right. Anyone else? If not, let's pray. Thank you for coming today. Dear Father, we thank you for this day, the time to put the business of the world aside and to focus on your word. Thank you for a book like Esther that we can see you working behind the scenes to make the world a better place. Father, we pray for Alyssa Topper, as well as Jacob, and their